All right, everyone. I hope you had an excellent break to give some of those amazing ideas a little bit of time to settle in your mind and guide our conversation forward.
You're going to do awesome. Oh,
now we know it's on. We were just wondering, how do we do a mic check without a mic check? For people who are just joining us for this session, we spent some time this morning learning from incredible athletes about their experiences with their mental health journey and also getting some advice from them about how we, as the adults who gather around them, can actually be supportive, how we can listen, how we can notice, and how we can be curious as opposed to accusatory when we see things that are unexpected or seem like something might be wrong. We then heard when we're creating culture, especially as coaches, what are some things we can do, like build trust and not fear emotion and separate the idea of your performance from your identity. What we are going to talk about now in this incredible panel is how, as a whole community, we can create the relationships that strengthen mental health. There are so many ways that we as communities have learned to value youth sports, but maybe we don't always think about how to support beyond buying a candy bar or a ticket. And this is an opportunity for that conversation. I get to introduce the moderator for this panel. David Plummer is a two-time Olympic medalist in swimming. He won 3 world championship medals and 4 US national titles, and was team captain of the 2015 World Championship team, and in the midst of that, also missed qualifying for 3 consecutive Olympic Games, once by just 0.12 seconds. I want you to think about something that you did a 1/10 of a second slower than you wanted to recently.
everything.
After retirement from Olympic swimming, David pursued a career in athletic administration at his alma mater, the University of Minnesota. He's been a volunteer and a professional coach at the club and high school level, and is the dad of 2 young athletes as well. I think you can understand why he is perfectly placed to guide this portion of our conversation. Let's welcome this group.
Welcome ourselves.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Gilboa. I have the unique opportunity to introduce this panel. And before I get to that, I wanted to just say something really quickly about community and connection. That's what we're going to talk about here for the next hour or so, is community and connection. I have a pretty deep-seated belief that we are impacting the people around us all of the time, good, bad, or indifferent. We're having an influence and an impact on the people around us. So what we've heard this morning, I think, reiterates that the more we can be intentional, the more we can be thoughtful about that impact, the better we're going to be. And we're going to hear from some great people who I think are going to expand on that for us. So first, to my right, is Keisha Caine Bishop. She's the CEO and founder of Bishop Athletics Consulting. She's the president of the Lyles Brother Foundation. She's a certified life coach, and she was a pretty impressive athlete at Seton Hall. We have Dr. Peter Scales, who's a developmental psychologist, a high school tennis coach, an author, and a columnist. And his research has really focused on developmental relationships and how those play out within sport. And Dr. Brittany Patterson, who is a licensed psychologist, an assistant professor at Maryland School of Medicine, and really focuses in on positive mental health and well-being in her work. So welcome to all of you. I'm excited to dive in. I wanted to start a little bit with sort of understanding the impact of coaches and leaders in sport on youth athletes. And really kind of think about that connection and how that plays out and the responsibility that people have within this. So I wanted to start with you, Keisha, and ask, how have you seen coaches have a positive impact on young people with regard to mental health?
So the main way I've seen coaches have a positive impact is in my own personal life. When I started running track in middle school, and I had my high school coach who actually came up to me personally and said that he believed that I could be one of the best track athletes in high school, which was something really weird because nobody in my family had ever run track before, so that was a really huge, statement for him to say. But because of his belief in me, I was able to go ahead and put in the work and, pursue the dreams that we had developed together and go on to run at Seton Hall and have a great career there and things like that. So that's my first experience personally with track athletes, or having a great coach, influence you. For my children, Noah and Josephus, their coach, because I was a single mom, I was divorced by the time they ran in high school, their coach was such an intricate part of their journey because he wasn't just a coach, like some people have mentioned up here on stage before. He would pick them up when I had to work and take them to practice or from practice. And on Fridays after practice, he would take the whole team out for pizza. So he became more than just a coach. He was almost like a family member. So much so that they actually bought him a car when they first turned professional as a way to kind of say thank you. But coaches are so much more than coaches, and most of the time, unfortunately, they're underpaid. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. I think we have some coaches in the audience that might agree with you there.
Yes.
Dr. Scales, same question.
Yeah, I think that as the other panels have laid out, the coaches play so many roles, as Keisha just mentioned, and the bottom line of this, the foundation of this, is that our student athletes need to know that how we feel about them as coaches has nothing to do with whether they win or lose. We're there. There are ways that the research shows that when we relate in 5 very specific ways that we call developmental relationships, all sorts of good things happen. Physical health, mental health, emotional health, performance in school. One, bottom line, is expressing care, in appropriate ways. The second one is challenging them to grow, and most coaches are really good at the challenge part. Many coaches are good at the expressing care part, but we need to do more on that. But then we get into providing supports of different kinds, and the supports are different for every student athlete. Not everybody needs the same thing, so that's part of doing what we need to do and being a positive influence as a coach, is understanding each of our student athletes as human beings, what they need uniquely. The fourth one's a really challenging one, and that is sharing power. That is giving our young people opportunities to have a voice, have a say, contribute to decisions that affect them and the team that they're on. That's one where I think a lot of coaches need to do more work. And then the fifth one is expanding their sense of possibilities for themselves. Not just the possibility that they could get better at their sport. They're probably going to get better if they stay with us, even if you're not a great coach. But a great coach is a people builder before they're a player builder. And you're expanding their possibilities for the purpose in their lives, for who they can be and become right now and in the future. So when you put those 5 things together, that's really the foundation for then connecting to the coach's philosophy that we talked about in the other panels, about the place of winning, improvement, and growth as the priority. But none of that is workable without those strong 5 ways of relating to people, young people, so that they're really helping them develop, and not just as a player, but as a person. Yeah.
I think it's such a great point, and great advice for coaches and great advice for parents. Really, really solid fundamentals that you can lean on to build the right relationships both ways. Dr. Patterson, I'm interested in your thoughts.
Absolutely. Well, I just have to say I have the privilege of echoing a lot of what we've heard already from the other panels and just now from my colleagues here. The relationship, I'm going to take Dave's comment just a bit further, the relationship that you currently have with a youth athlete or young person is impacting their well-being. It is. So what side are we on? We have to know that every interaction we have makes a difference, and you are equipped right now in this moment to be supporting the well-being, and you likely are, because the folks in this type of conversation are invested in having these conversations and moving forward. And so thank you for doing that, and just know your role truly matters. So in addition to that, what I'll add and kind of just try and concretize a little bit, we've heard a lot of fantastic gems today. There's something we can do right now, because there's a lot to process. There's a lot that you'll reflect on later and want to keep track of. But right now, just to make sure you keep the conversation going, we can, what I'm going to call care, that's C-A-R-E. First, for the C, create space to have conversation. So somewhere on your calendar, monthly, at least, do it more. I would love for people to do that more, but at least monthly, even if it's 10 minutes, commit to creating a space to have conversations with your individual athletes about whatever topic, just like when you plan for practices, right? You create the schedule for a year or more. You don't necessarily know what's going to go on that schedule, but you have this space, dedicated time to have a conversation. So that's the C. A is ask questions. I think when we talk about priorities, what we've heard consistently is that the strongest coaches, the strongest caregivers, the most supportive people, they ask athletes questions with intention to listen and to integrate the feedback that they're receiving. The R is to reinforce, okay? Once you hear from your young people, your young athletes, you get to reinforce and hold them accountable to what it is they said they're motivated to achieve, helping them to use their strengths, helping them to elevate who they already are, but also helping them when they fall a little bit short, because we all will. That's the growth opportunity. And you can hold them accountable and say, hey, you told me you wanted to do this. So I'm going to reinforce you using what you've already told me. That's powerful and motivating to young people. And the E is to expand their connections, because not one single person here can be everything to everyone, right? I think these folks here and all of our panelists so far, they're excellent models. You need a team. The coach can't be the therapist, but they can bring in therapists. They can have someone research and create a list of all those mental health resources in their community. That's something we can do. So expand their network. You are truly crucial, and they need a network beyond you too, beyond each of us individually.
God, we're one question in and we got two great models. I love it. One of the crucial things about a coach-athlete relationship is feedback. Feedback is constant in sport. We talk about development. The ideal is we're getting better every day, incremental increases all the time. We're getting better. How do coaches get feedback right? What can they do to make sure that feedback is being taken the right way? The athletes are able to utilize it, and it's having a positive impact on that athlete's growth and development.
Well, I can speak from the parental standpoint. So I know whenever my guys would finish a race, whether they won or lost, which I hate those words, but no matter what place they came in, the first thing I would ask them is, how do you feel? Because I want to make sure you're healthy, that you didn't hurt yourself. And then I would ask them, what did you learn? Because ultimately, sport is a metaphor for life. So hopefully you're learning something in each race. And I heard, I think it was Coach Lola who was saying that we have to make sure that we have an environment of trust where the athlete feels that it's okay to fail. And in our family, we have an acronym for FAIL. We say it stands for First Attempt in Learning. Because failing to me is not losing a race, because you can come in dead last in a race, but have run your fastest time. Mm-hmm. Or you could lose a basketball game, but have increased your, and I don't know much about basketball, so don't laugh at me, but have gotten the most free throws possible. I think that makes sense, right? So I think as a parent, when the lesson comes in, I am trying to teach my children that success is, we define success. We don't allow the win or the loss to define success. And when we take that power back and we get to create what success is, then the lesson is constantly being learned.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, to build on that, I think the success of how you give feedback as a coach depends on how successfully you've laid out your coaching philosophy to not only your players, but to the parents and to the athletic director and the whole system that you work within. In my school, I came up with this system called compete, learn, and honor. That's how we define success. Winning is a byproduct of competing, which means giving 100%. And like Gracie said, some days you got 40%, but if you're giving 100% of that 40%, okay, we're good for today. We all have those days. Learn, are you an open, curious, and humble learner, always feeling like there's more for me to learn? And coaches modeling that, because coaches always saying, hey, I've got more to learn. You know, I listen to websites, I listen to other coaches, I'm trying to get better as a coach. And honor, which is the foundation for everything, by how you act, how you behave on and off the playing field. Are you bringing credit to yourself, your teammates, your opponents, officials, everybody you connect with, and the game you play? And if you're doing that and you're having fun, then you're a success. And you know, if the scoreboard says you won, okay, then you're a double success. That's great. But you're already a success. And so I think if you build that and you pose then growth is simply a matter, athletic contests are simply a matter of solving the problems that a contest gives to you. Every athletic event is a series of puzzles, it's a series of problems. Sometimes you as the athlete are the biggest problem that day. Your opponent is not the problem, you are. You're just not in your 100%. Sometimes your opponent is playing lights out. They're having their PR day, right? And you've got to figure out how to deal with that. Some days you solve them, some days you simply try to solve them. But if you frame everything for your season in those terms, then you can offer constructive feedback in a way that is taken not so, oh man, coach is critiquing me, I must be, you know, really bad at this, or you know, take it deeply and, you know, what's my worth as a human being, but just, hey, we're trying to solve a problem here together, okay? And the way you do that, like you said, Britt, is ask questions, because there's a big difference between me as a coach saying, David, what were you thinking? Mm-hmm. And so David, when you did that, what was going through your mind? What were you trying to achieve? What were you thinking? I mean, we have a whole different conversation, but it's the same words. But the emotion's different, and the context you put it in is different because of the coaching philosophy and the relationships that you've established. So, yeah.
That's really powerful. And I feel like I'm cheating because I get to just kind of continue to say some of what's been said, but just such key points. I'm going to go back to something that I've heard this team talk about before, and something I know Ms. Bishop uses with her children is something that in the psych world we would call a compliment sandwich, which is the idea that we're going to start with strengths. These young people are doing amazing things every day, but it's so easy for us to find the error. We're error-driven. So this is an opportunity for self-evaluation because the brain does that. It's more efficient to catch error than it is to find the strength, elevate it and say, I love how you executed it, you know, this specific task. Then insert the constructive criticism. To take that a step further, here's what we can do. And then finally summarize it by, again, identifying that strength, helping them to use it better in the future. On top of that, I'm gonna keep hitting on some core themes. Hearing from the youth athlete first, that's always just such a great strategy. We had a youth meeting this morning, and these young people are incredible. They know so much. They ask great questions, and if you just ask them, hey, what do you think you're doing well? They can tell you because they're anxious about it. Like, oh, did I do it better that time? And then what are you struggling with? How did that go? And they'll give you some feedback that you can then build on. You can say, you're right, you have great insight. I also noticed that happened, okay? So that it allows a back and forth where you see that individual as a smart, capable being, achieving the goals that they're most motivated to accomplish. And that is success. Hearing from athletes this morning, that success is when they're achieving who they want to be. And then the last thing I'll say is create proactive space. Again, I'm gonna go back to the C. Create space to have these feedback-focused meetings because it's easy to catch folks in practice. We've all been, probably many of us have competed, as did I once upon a time. Not on the level of some of these folks here, but right, we need the feedback, but how you get it matters. If you're being reamed out in the middle of practice at random, it feels targeted, it feels negative, self-esteem is attacked. It doesn't feel very good, nor is it productive. But if you have a regularly scheduled meeting where the point is we're gonna talk about what you're doing well, what's not going well, and how we can improve, then it's easier to digest. It's easier to know that this is a growth opportunity, and this is growth focused, not attack focused or marginalizing. And so in terms of enhancing well-being, we have so many opportunities if only we're willing to talk with our folks first, ask them what they think is going on, and build upon the strengths of the feedback that they give to us.
Can I just say one more thing? I know as a parent, every year in January, and I still do it, I go to my kids and I say, how can I be a better parent to you? And what did I do right this past year? And what do I need to improve on? And they have given me some really good answers over the years while they're growing up. But I think we can expand that thought and have the coach ask the athlete, how can I coach you better? And that's something I've never heard a coach do that. And I thought when my sons went professional, because they have their team, they have their agent, their sports psychologist, their nutritionist, their massage therapist, PT, chiropractor, all that. And so I'm waiting at the end of the year for somebody to go, let's come together, all these guys, I think it's only a couple of women on our team, and say, let's ask the athletes, what do we do right this year and what do we do wrong? But you know what? Nobody called. I said they wanted that meeting. So I don't even think it occurred to anybody to do that. So I just think as a parent, it helped me with my parenting. And with a coach, I don't see why it wouldn't help. But it has to be respectful. You know, I always told my kids that it has to be respectful. But if your heart is in the right place, it's a great conversation to have from a parent to the child. And it'd probably be a great conversation to have from a coach to an athlete.
I think you're so right. I mean, great points across the board, but what I hear you saying is, I mean, a similar theme to what we've heard all morning in that we have to model what we expect from our athletes. And the more we're open to feedback ourselves, the easier it is to build that trust both ways. I think that's so meaningful. I think all of your answers kind of lead into this next question. We've heard often this morning, especially on the athletes panel, the importance of being seen as a whole person, not a one-dimensional sort of performance being, but an entire whole person. And I know, reflecting back on my experience, that was not a common part of my experience. I was good enough at a young enough age that it felt like I became a commodity. I was the ticket that was going to get a coach to the next level, as opposed to a young person trying to navigate, growing up in difficult situations. So I'm interested of your thoughts on, how do we do that? How do we, in a relationship, ensure that our athletes are being seen as an entire person?
Well, if I can jump in on that, I think this jumps off of something. I think it was Noah in the athletes panel was saying he had a lot of interests and was able to pursue them, and that was part of not putting all the identity eggs into the sport basket, right? And I coach high school tennis, and it's an age where young people are experimenting with lots of different interests. And sometimes they have an interest that lasts a while. Sometimes it's, a few days or a few weeks and move on to something else. But I think coaches can do better at supporting the multiple interests instead of, if you're not committed to practice every day at this time, staying until every day at this time, then you can't be on the team. And I try and work out with my student athletes and the families, how much of this can we do? And every player knows that we do this. There's no behind the back deals going on. It's like, I want you to have a life other than playing tennis. I would like it if tennis became a love of your life, like it has for mine. That's part of my job, is to show you why it's lovable, to pursue this for the rest of your life. But you have other interests, and I want to support those. So how can we do that? Okay, if you're in theater, what kind of arrangement can we make with your theater sponsor? The teacher who's helping you with that. Or, you have a job. I mean, some of our students have to work to help their families, so they can't be on the team. So I think we have more degrees of freedom to work out options, as long as everybody knows that absolutely every player on the team can work out an option. This is not a deal for favorites. It's not for stars. It's for everybody. Because we want to support the well-roundedness. And that, in the long run, is going to do just what you articulated, which was, I have other things that are part of my identity and not just this sport. So that helps deal with the inevitable ups and downs of the sport. Yeah.
I think from the parental standpoint, it's so important to make sure that your child that's the athlete, that's if you have more than one child, because I have 3 biological children. So one of my children is my youngest, she's my daughter. And for the longest time, we would go to events, and I would say, this is my daughter, Abby. And then everybody would say, oh, well, do you run track? And she would say, no. And then they say, well, what do you do? And she would say, I'm Abby. And but it took her a really long time to find her passion. Now she knows she loves biochemistry. She's getting ready to graduate from college with that as a major. But it took her a really long time to find what she was passionate about. But if I only defined my children through their identities in their sports, she would have never felt like she had a place in our family. And so I think it's important as a parent that we make sure that we are not defining our children as, oh, this is my track athlete, or this is my Olympian, or this is my, it's like, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. This is Josephus, and he is the one who challenges me all the time to think outside the box. So I'm speaking to their character traits and not their accomplishments. And as a parent, that's how I try to make sure that they remember that they are not just an athlete.
Oh, so powerful. And my wish for the world would be that everyone could have a mentor like Ms. Bishop, because that is such a model for what it is folks like me, psychologists, would promote, which is developing the whole person. We've heard this across panels, develop the who, not the do, right? Our athletes this morning, that's specifically what they spoke to. The folks that connected best with them, helped them to thrive, were those individuals who were asking about them beyond their sport, noticing when they're struggling emotionally, and just saying something's different, what's going on? And so Mrs. Bishop, I think, offers the example through her family, how she's addressed these things, but it's exactly what needs to happen. I deem myself the supportive challenger. I'm gonna challenge us as adults, whatever our position may be in the life of a youth, to specifically ask ourselves, how are we promoting the well-being of young people, and know that it is our responsibility to not just develop them as if they are one-dimensional. That is a disservice. Because when that one thing is taken away due to tragedy or lack of access, lack of resource, who are they? And what I heard the athletes saying this morning was, my mental health was improved because I had these other things I could rely on. In fact, a young person had to have been in high school, I believe, this morning asked, what did you do when you were injured to keep yourself positive and to keep pushing forward? And Noah and Josephus were able to describe the different arts that they were engaged in and how they spent their time beyond their sport. That's absolutely critical. And so we have a responsibility, not just an opportunity, but a responsibility to develop more than just the athlete. You're already doing it, and we can enhance it. When we do that, we are preventing. That's what came up in the previous panel led by Dr. Chapman. if we want to avoid the crisis, people shouldn't just outreach when they're in crisis, right? Mental health applies to all of us. We have to normalize that conversation. It applies to all of us. But if we want to prevent, in some scenarios we can, the crisis, we bolster their strengths and their resources now with intention, often, because they will be better off for it. So that's what I would like to add.
Two quick things, if I can add to build on that. At Search Institute, where I do research psychology, we've done a lot of work on young people's deepest interests and passions, and we call them sparks, what you're talking about, those other interests. I mean, they literally kind of light your fire from within, get you up in the morning, and for most young people who are coming out and playing sports is one of them. That sport is one of them. But you dig a little bit deeper, and they've got design, architecture, medicine, interested in animals, maybe becoming a vet. I mean, the depth of the people we work with as student athletes, we focus on the athlete and less on the student. But the interesting thing is the root of the word student means to grow. So they're student athletes, So we want to, yes, some of them may end up becoming the elite athletes that we've heard from. That's wonderful. Most of them will become, hopefully, elite people and just living the life, their best version of themselves, as you put it, Keisha. And that's the job that we have. But part of the way we do that as coaches is ask questions about other things they're interested in. Or if we overhear them in a conversation with one of their teammates or somebody else about something that they're obviously energized and enthusiastic about, follow up with that in another conversation yourself, and just show them that you're interested in those things beyond the sport. And that goes a long way, again, back to your feedback question of how you help them grow and dealing with mistakes, which are not simply okay, but which are necessary, as Ken pointed out earlier, and Brett. I mean, you've got to make mistakes or you're not stretching, you're not growing. So that can't be acceptable unless you're showing that interest in them as a whole person. So, yeah.
I love what you all are saying, and the thing that I'm pulling out is there's almost a priority issue here. With Dr. Scales, you're talking about how do we prioritize sports over all of these other things? Sometimes we can't. So how do we make sure these priorities are in line? Keisha, what I hear you saying is, we're not going to prioritize one part of your identity. We're going to make sure that it's all of these things. And I think that's really difficult to do. Like we got to recognize that there's a lot of forces that continue to push performance above everything else. But I think that I've always believed that being able to be yourself, to be more authentic, to be a more whole person, to find those other sparks, and to be great at a number of things, that's not going to decrease your performance. It's gonna increase it. I mean, I know that was true for myself. When I got to a point in my career where I was still competing as a father, as a husband, as a coach, and I had to think about being good at all of those other things because it wasn't an option to be a bad parent. And as I did that, it was an investment in everything, and it made it easier to give my whole self as an athlete. So I think what you all are saying is so important, and we have to understand that performance push, but we can push back and say that this is going to fuel performance as well. The other thing I'm interested in, as we're talking about kind of this coach-athlete relationship, and I want to talk a little bit about the coach-parent relationship too, but is expectations. I think expectations are so important for athletes, for a team culture, for all of the things that we do surrounding performance and development. So I'm interested in each of your takes on how expectations play into the relationship with an athlete.
So I'm going to tell you a story, and I hope it answers your question. So we were at the Olympic trials in June. It seems so long ago now, but it was just in June. And it was the morning of the finals of the 200 meters for Noah. And the whole year, we have been hearing so much negativity about how he didn't look the same anymore, and is he actually going to make the team, and just all of these horrible things that the media was saying and social media saying and things like that. So I said, Noah, let's do breakfast. So the morning of the finals, we go and do breakfast. And I said, this is the deal. I said, I heard T.D. Jakes say something really powerful. And he said, when you grow up in certain communities, you hear statistics like you're not going to live past 25, or you're going to end up in jail by a certain age, or you're going to develop high blood pressure or diabetes, and that's your fate. And he said, well, people saying that is not the worst thing about it. The worst thing about it is when you believe it. And so I told him, there are people saying, oh, is Noah going to make the Olympic team? Oh, is he going to be the same Noah this, and all these negative things. I said, but we can let them say whatever they want to say as long as we don't believe it. Because we write our story. They don't. Their job is to sell newspapers, and we're going to let them do their job. Our job is to create our own life story. And he went out and he won that race. And it took a lot of pressure off of him. But I think the main thing I wanted him to know was don't let other people determine your narrative. So that was the expectation part. Another thing I always want my children to know is it does not matter what in the world is going on outside the doors of our house. You can come home, and that is a safe place. Because the higher up you go in life, or the higher the career ladder you go up, the more your underwear shows. But it's okay. We could wash your underwear at home. So we good.
I love it.
I love that about writing your own story. One of the things I do in tennis, and not every sport has this opportunity, but most sports do. Well, I won't say most, but a lot do. Where you have a timeout or a changeover, a moment where you can talk with your player. And, and I bring them over to the fence and say, tell me the story of the match so far. Again, asking question. Instead of, you did this, and that, you got to do this and this and this to get back in this. Tell me the story of the match thus far. If you're writing a headline, what would the headline be? Okay, they say whatever they say. How would you write a different story for the rest of the match? So even in that micro moment, you're talking about writing your life story, but even in that little micro moment, you can write your story. How do you write your story? And again, it's by asking questions to build on Britt's point from earlier. You're empowering your student athletes. You're empowering them, whether they're JV people or getting ready for the Olympic trials. They're the ones who are, I tell my players all the time, you are the boss of your tennis career. Fill in the blank for whatever your sport is. I'm your coach. I'm your guide. I'm a consultant. I am not your boss. You're the boss. And if you're 14 or 15, you're still learning to be the boss, but you're the boss because you've got to make the choices about the priorities in your life, the expectations you're going to have in different parts of your life, whose voice you're going to listen to, and whose voice you're going to reject, how much time you're going to put in, what you're going to put time in on. I can help you with saying, here are your choices. But you're the one who makes the choice. And so all of this that I think Keisha's talking about and that Britt's talking about, I am, and every other panelist has been talking about, is about how to empower our young people in a culture of respect. And if you can do that and help them figure out through the respect and empowerment what their larger purpose in life is, how they're going to contribute to make the world better, guess what? You're a great coach even if you don't win a game that season. You're a great coach, period.
And I'll say the modeling, again, is just so outstanding. As someone who gets to talk about research and what, the evidence supports all of the time, what is often hard to find are the models to demonstrate the point, and they're demonstrating it. It's beautiful to watch that unfold. In terms of expectations, I want to return to the athletes panel where Deja kind of described how when she was going through a difficult time, she knew that she could have a conversation with her coach and that he would be supportive no matter what she chose to do. The expectation is clear. Her humanness mattered more. Also heard from difficult experiences that Gracie shared about, where the expectations of her coach were the hardest periods of her life. So the expectations really matter, and they're observable. I'm a person who has training in observing classroom spaces in particular. My work is with youth in schools, facilitating mental health supports and services. But when I walk into a space, without a word being said, I can begin to see some of what the expectations of this space are through how people engage with one another, how much fun is happening, how many smiles occur, how many fights are happening. And we can see that in practices too. Where's the joy? Where's the energy? Where's the negativity? Where's the isolation? It can be felt the moment someone walks into space. So our first question to ask is, what are the expectations of my space? What do people feel once they walk into my space? Do they know I'm a safe space?
Yeah, and I think, you made a point earlier about making the deliberate time for conversation. And, one of the things, again, that, can be done differently in different sport environments, but one of the things we do in our tennis program is we have like 24 different slogans or habits that we want to build that relate to compete, learn, honor. And a couple of them are up there every day. And at the beginning of practice, we talk about, what does this mean? And, I'll give you an example. 2 of them we do together. Improving is a better goal than winning, and mistakes are necessary to improve. And we go, what does that mean to you? So we have a discussion about what that means in your own words. And you can't use, improving is a better goal than winning means improving is a better goal than winning. No, that's a tautology. We're going to, you can't define a thing by saying it. But, so we're going to learn about something, else other than tennis. But we have this conversation. And in their own words, the players then can figure out, because I can control whether I improve. I cannot control whether I win. I can control, if improvement is your goal, your expectation, you can reach your goals almost all the time. And you can't reach improvement unless you're willing and wanting to make mistakes, because you're trying new things that are outside your comfort zone. And you're in a safe environment. Coach is going to support you making mistakes because you're trying, not yell at you, not punish you, not take away playing time because you didn't perform the right way.
I think that's really awesome, because I think Coach Lola said it. He mentioned something about trust, and it made me think of a story with Josephus. So Josephus is my wonderful, strong-willed child, and I don't know if any of you have ever had a strong-willed child, but they're wonderful, wonderful people. Right. But I remember he was so strong-willed. He was determined he was going to run a particular race a certain way. Even though he had been sick, he was over in Europe for like 2 days. And Noah told him, bruh, that's not a good way to run that race. And his sports psychologist said, Josephus, I don't think that's a good way to run that race. So after the race, his agent calls me and he tells me how he did. And I was so hurt. I'm crying on the sofa. And my daughter, who's not empathetic, looks at me and goes, would you like a hug? So that is how strong-willed he is. Well, the next year, his coach, finally getting to understand his personality, said, Josephus, I want you to run your race this way. And if you don't run well, it will be my fault. And the fact that the coach gave him the opportunity to fail gave him the trust that it was okay to go out there and do it Coach's way. And that was the first time, or one of the only times, I think he ran the race the way Coach wanted him to run it. Now, it didn't go well, but the coach took up the slack. But that's that trust. Is that a good example of trust?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So then he didn't feel like he had to beat himself. I was like, well, coach told me to do it like that, so that's what I did. So.
Yeah. I'll add one more thing to that. I think it's such a great example. It's a fantastic example of trust, right? If you know that in a space you can fail and you're still going to be lifted up, woof, you have done something powerful that's really powerful. So if you can do that, allow people to fail and know that they're going to be supported in that and they're going to grow through it, that's my hope for all young people. But what I also want to add related to expectations is a question we received earlier this morning was around, we're seeing less young people willing to engage in sports. Through research and intuitively, we know that there's so many benefits of youth participation in activities like track, like basketball, et cetera. But we're seeing less youth engaging and dropping out because of increasing mental health challenges, lack of access, many different reasons. But given that opportunities to engage in sports is protective, productive, and helps mental health and well-being, we have to think about what are our expectations, our communicated expectations and beliefs around mental health, because that is also deterring folks from remaining in sports spaces. There is a lot of stigma that we have to address. As the mental health person here, I have to acknowledge that not just in the sports world, but in pretty much any setting we enter, there's still a lot of stigma around the word mental health. So I will say as many times as I can, we have to talk about how that shows up in our spaces. Do we actively say the word mental health? Do we talk about it? Is it invited? If someone comes to you, and I know it's not the case that in every setting, youth feel comfortable going into their coach and saying, hey, emotionally, I'm really struggling. Folks don't feel safe to do that. And if that's the case in your environment, that's all right, because you're acknowledging there's a challenge. Now we get to overcome it. And there are resources, so many resources out there for that. So we have to examine, again, self-examine, what are our expectations around what should occur once an individual is expressing their needs related to emotional, mental health, but also how are we proactively having conversations to invite that into my space? Because when I invite it, I open doors for some folks who will never make it there simply because they're struggling with trauma and the folks that can give them opportunities don't know how to, are scared to, don't want to, don't have the resources to do it. When we invite those conversations, we're inviting more youth into a protective opportunity that can allow them to grow and elevate all of their strengths and overcome levels of hardship that are even hard to imagine at times. With opportunities like sports and other outlets, our youth do better, but we're seeing them drop off. We need them to come in. And so let's also examine, how are we talking about and supporting the mental health needs of our young people?
Yeah, it's such a great point you're making, and the way we talk with our parents and families about this to bring to the community aspect of it, just even letting your parents and families know we're going to talk about these things. We are creating these spaces. I mean, I put my posters up and we talk about mental and emotional issues, right? But we also, I talk with the parents is a very, very important part of our program, saying, here's what we're going to do. And daily, practically, I send emails to the parents, say, here's what we did today, here's why we did it, so and hopefully, parents will support that at home. And sometimes parents, give additional information to me as a coach about the state of mind or medications that may not have yet shown up on the record that I have as a coach, but issues that are happening that are really useful for me to know as a coach, to be able to know and love that child as an individual who has unique needs in my sports space. But they would never have talked to me about this stuff if I hadn't said, here's what we're doing. I want you to know, and I want to hear from you. So, beyond the permission slip, I think we have to do a lot more with communicating with our parents and our families. Yeah.
And I think as parents, we have to make sure we're mentally grounded. So if we need help as parents, because we can be crazy at times. So if we need help as a parent, we need to have our own support system that we are reaching out to, however that might look for you. So maybe at your job, you might have EAP. Maybe they have access to counselors at your job, or maybe you can reach out to your support system. But as a parent, we always have to know what our support system is so that then we can turn around and minister to our youth. And I know even for me, there are times when I have to call their sports psychologist sobbing and crying because I'm struggling. Even at the Olympic trials, at one point, I had to go up in the bathroom stall and close the door and just fell to the ground sobbing because I knew I couldn't do it out in my seat because there were too many cameras around and I had to project this image. But in the bathroom stall, there are no cameras. I hope not. So I just literally fell to the ground and was sobbing because it is not just emotional for the athlete and the coach. If the parent is well vested, it's emotional for the whole team. But then when you see the athlete, you have to be there to support your child. So we have to have our own support team too.
Yeah, I think that's so appropriate. I want to ask one more question, and it's a big one. Our topic here is community and connection. And as I look at that in youth sport, the three biggest people in that community are coaches, athletes, and parents, right? And I think oftentimes, especially in the media, we hear about when it goes wrong. And it goes wrong, sometimes it goes really wrong. But I think if we can lean on we're all on the same team and think about that connection each way, because we should be having empathy for parents too, because it's not easy. We should be having empathy for coaches. As our athlete said this morning, our coaches have to deal with a lot. And it's not getting simpler, it's getting more complicated. So I'm curious how you all would help to build that community of connection between these three groups.
Well, I think it's important from my standpoint as a parent to let everyone on the team know the goal. First, you have to know who your team is. And your team, like the guidance counselor at high school, that's part of your team because you have to meet the NCAA eligibility requirements if they want to play, on a scholarship level. Also, the primary care physician, because if your child doesn't have all the vaccinations up to date, or if they are struggling with some mental health issues or just something else, primary care physician needs to know that they're also competing and how that might affect their health. There are just so many different people that we don't think about that are part of the team, but I think it's important to communicate with whoever the team is and make a list of your team and communicate the end goal, whatever that may be, whether it's to win state championships or whether it's just to improve from last year. Because if we don't know what the goal is, then how in the world are we going to all head towards it? And there may be people on your team that you don't even suspect to be on your team. I know for us, with my guys, as a single mom, sometimes I couldn't. Noah went to the Olympic trials with a hole in his spikes. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I forgot to tell you I needed some new spikes. And I was like, what? Like, this was in high school, not when he was running for Adidas. But don't want to make Adidas look bad. But because of our community, and we had done a lot of fundraising, we were able to raise like over $10,000 from people we didn't even know that helped pay for medical and chiropractor when they were in school and travel. So there's so many people out there who probably want to be part of your team that you don't know about. And just sharing your vision with other people, you'd be surprised who you would pick up as a resource along the way.
Yeah, I think that sharing your vision with as many people as you can. Your team, you have this core team that you listed a few people, but then you've got this wider team, and at the high school level, I mean, your athletic director is just absolutely crucial. Your principal is absolutely crucial, and so just keeping them informed about your coaching philosophy, the decisions you're making, why you're making them, to prioritize mental and emotional health as much as sport performance, that's your value on your squad. And, I think you'll find that most ADs and most principals will be proud to be associated with coaches who, put out, that priority and put the children first. I mean, we rhetorically always say, children are our first priority, but we've got to keep doing it in real life. And just even a little communication like that can bring you an ally in an AD or a principal that maybe you didn't think you had. Just because they've got lots of things to deal with and they're not really thinking, especially if you're not a big revenue program, they're not really thinking about your sport, So get in their face a little bit in a nice, informative way and say, hey, just FYI, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that can build a lot of bridges really quickly.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it sounds to me like just convening a space, an opportunity for us to communicate about our shared vision and goals. And sometimes it can feel difficult to think about who all needs to be on the team. And so sometimes it's helpful just to start with the outcome. Bring the folks together, say, this is what we're going for, what else are you going for? And then work backwards. Okay, who do we need on our team? And if we are all talking together, we have a better opportunity to be more comprehensive in deciding who these team members need to be, and also incorporate the youth voice. They should be part of that conversation. They know who they need on their team. They know what they're struggling with right now. They need a social media consultant probably, right? Because social media is hard. P.S., one thing I want to throw out there, just talk to your youth and say, unfollow the things that aren't helpful. Just click unfollow, just click unfollow. But we can build the team together. When we have these types of conversations, I know it can feel big, like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna do all these things? The great thing is that no one is expected to have all the answers today. But when we bring everyone together and say, I don't have all the answers, but here's the question, then we're modeling community. And then we come to some conclusions, some strong conclusions together. So we're modeling it and we're creating it. And that's clearly our expectations and our values because we demonstrated it and just coming together. So coming together and being in communication regularly. Once a year will not suffice. As often as possible is the goal. Once a year won't suffice, y'all, not once a year. And not just through email. If you can, come face to face with intentions to talk about what our outcomes are and who needs to be on our team so that we can achieve the goals of developing the who, not the do.
And I like what Britt said about the modeling. That's something, if that's one thing I take away from you is modeling. Because as a parent, we need to model, as your first team is your family. Your family is your very first team that you're born into. So even to the point where if your child had a really tough day at practice, they're exhausted, they got a lot of homework, they hopefully can come to you and say, Mom or Dad, I am so exhausted, I got so much homework, practice was really hard. Can somebody else take out the trash for me? Yeah, that's what a team does. Together, everyone achieves more. We pick up the slack. So you're teaching them to communicate their needs, teaching them to be authentic about their feelings, and then the family learns that together we're stronger. So just because one of us is tired, somebody else can pick up the slack.
I love it. God, so good. So good. Well, we got a few minutes left here for a question or two if we have any. Yeah.
What are the panel's thoughts on the increased pressure club sports put on families and athletes to specialize at an early age instead of having a more diverse athletic portfolio through exploration of seasonal sports activities? It seems there is a fear out there that your athlete won't make it to the top without specializing. And has that had an increased effect on the mental health of athletes?
Well, I'm going to speak loud and clear. I absolutely abhor and detest it. Was that clear enough? We're not the model family, but for our family, my kids did everything. They did violin, they did flute, they did swimming, they did the chess club. I they did soccer, they did art, they did hip hop dance. We homeschooled in the beginning. Then when that didn't work until around 3rd grade, we put them in traditional school. You have to just let them explore. And I even tell them as an adult, my daughter said, yeah, I'm gonna get my degree in biochemistry and I'm gonna do this and that. And then I'm gonna go open a daycare. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's what you want to do? Go do it. We don't have to fit inside this box. And I think as parents, we become fans instead of parents. Our children don't need fans. They need a parent. They need a safe place to come after the competition is over, where you are still the parent and you are still the safe place.
Oh, amen.
Yeah. I say amen too. Amen. And let me affirm that, again, I love the modeling because the literature and what we've heard from our athletes is consistent. Our athletes are more than athletes. They are sisters. They are future entrepreneurs. They are future artists. They're so dynamic. And if we solely focus on one aspect of an individual's life, we are adding undue pressure, which of course compromises mental health. So what side are we on? Are we promoting well-being or are we contributing to mental health distress? That becomes the question. So I think her very clearly stated position is supported. We should be developing the whole person beyond just a specific sport or any sport at all.
I completely agree, and I feel like I want to weigh in at least quickly because I was a specialist. I was a specialist from 5 or 6 years old till I was 30.
Wow.
And I think the thing that, it made it hard in some ways because my identity got way more wrapped up in sport. But the second thing that I found was the more that I increased my athleticism outside of the pool, the better I performed. There's research to support the more well-rounded you are as an athlete, the higher you can perform. So if people aren't getting that right, they don't have all the facts yet.
Yeah.
So I think we're right there. Thank you all so much.
All right. Terrific panel. And just to summarize before we go into our last panel, David, you did a phenomenal job moderating. And there were a lot of really good nuggets in this panel, right? Wouldn't you agree? I think it was powerful. I think, Ms. Bishop, you've been bringing it all day. So with that being said, I really appreciated what you had to say as we talk about community and connection. The idea of fail, I love that. Right? First attempt in learning, I think is what you said. And I ask my athletes that too. What did you learn, right? After competition, a growth mindset. And then Dr. Scales highlighted the same sort of thing, this idea that winning is a byproduct of learning, right? And this idea that we're not just athletes. There's a number of facets to our identities as student athletes, and it's essential that they're students first. I think you said that the root of student is growth. That's a powerful concept. And then finally, Dr. Patterson, another acronym. We love acronyms, us athletic types, don't we? I think you said the CARE model, right? So creating space to have these conversations, asking questions, reinforcement, which is way more powerful than punishment, I might add, right? And then expanding their connections. Phenomenal panel, and it really sets us up very well for our last panel of the day, which will talk about the nuts and bolts and building capacity. So we're gonna take a quick break. Please be back prompt 2:15. We're gonna underscore that. Come back at 2:15, it'll be our last panel. We'll wrap up and go from there. All right, take a break.